Okay, so my last video that I'm going to put up for this June review time period is on essay picks. So here are some basic tips. Of course, I've been saying this all year, but bullets are your friend. Block your essay around the bullets. Make a chart. You will have scrap paper. I will give you the look if I don't see you writing down your blocked essay. Use the blocks in the chart to organize your essay into paragraphs. Just like the thematic, block your DBQ. Block your DBQ before reading the documents and answer all the DB questions in reflective, complete sentences. Let's look at if we get a belief systems essay. We haven't had a belief systems essay since the August 2010 Regents. This one was a DBQ. So it asked you to pick two out of the three, Islam, Christianity, and Buddhism. And for two of these three, describe how the belief system spread to a specific region or regions, and discuss how the belief system influenced a region or regions socially, economically, and or politically. So in my blocking, I picked Islam and Christianity. I outlined the beliefs and then I outlined the impacts, just like your flashcards do. For Islam, the holy book is the Quran. Muslims are followers of Islam. They pray in a mosque. They believe in the 5 pillars of faith. That there's faith that Allah is God and Muhammad is his messenger. They pray 5 times a day facing the holy city of Mecca in Saudi Arabia. They believe in fasting for 1 month out of the year. The month changes depending on the calendar. That month is called Ramadan. They believe that you should take a pilgrimage once in your life, a Hajj, to Mecca. They believe in giving alms or charity to the poor. Impacts, places, Middle East, primarily North Africa, the Golden Islamic Age, technological advancements, math and science advancements. The Crusades is when the Golden Islamic Age people will impact the Christian European people, and this will be the ladder to the Renaissance, another golden age. The Arab-Israeli conflict is a modern conflict that has Islam as part of its conflict, although the conflict has a lot more to do with nationalism. But there is a conflict over holy places and holy cities and who should control those holy cities in the Arab-Israeli conflict. Islamic fundamentalism is about creating a type of utopia, a society in which people are living according to a strict interpretation of the Quran. 2 places where we've seen an attempt is in Iran from 1979's revolution and in Afghanistan under the Taliban until the year 2001. The beliefs of Christianity, of course, is that Jesus is the Son of God, that he is the Messiah. They believe in the Old and New Testament, which is called the Bible. They, like Jewish people, believe in the 10 Commandments. They believe that Jesus died for their sins and he will rise again. It's called resurrection. In the Roman Empire, the Roman Catholic Church emerges. It's very powerful, especially during the Middle Ages. It gives the Middle Ages structure. The Roman Catholic Church, of course, starts the Crusades. The Crusades are about, for the Roman Catholic Church, getting the Muslims out of the Holy Land. But it's history's most successful failure because the Roman Catholic Church doesn't get them out of the Holy Land, but does get all this new knowledge from the Muslims. And so it's that ladder to the Renaissance. Trade, trade, trade. One of the biggest impact is the Protestant Reformation. And one of the technologies that impact that is that Johann Gutenberg invents the printing press. And the Bible is the book that's the most printed, and it's printed in people's everyday language, and we call that vernacular. Martin Luther, of course, is a monk of the Roman Catholic Church. He writes the 95 Theses where he talks about why selling of indulgences is wrong. He read the Bible cover to cover, and he did not see anything in the scripture that said that people couldn't buy their way into heaven, hence what an indulgence was. By him speaking out against the Catholic Church and getting away with it, he basically disunifies the faith of Europe. And so there's no more unity, religious unity in Europe. There's many religious wars. And then, of course, another example is Henry VIII, who was this Catholic king of England. He was called the defender of the Catholic faith. He breaks away from the Roman Catholic Church and forms his own church, the Anglican Church, or the Church of England. And today, England is predominantly a Protestant country. You could get a conflict essay. We haven't had a conflict essay since August 2013. Conflicts come in many forms. So it says this one is 2 armed conflicts, so violence. Historical circumstances, first bullet. Describe the ways in which the armed conflict affected a specific group, people, or country and/or region. Here are your choices. Peloponnesian War, the Crusades, English Civil War, Haitian War of Independence, that's Toussaint Louverture, the French Revolution, the Opium War, the Sepoy Rebellion, World War I, the Arab-Israeli conflict, and Rwanda crisis. All right, my two picks, World War I and the Arab-Israeli conflict. World War I because you can explain militarism, alliances, imperialism, nationalism. You can explain the definition for all four of those words. Militarism is a buildup of your weapons and it's a competition. Alliances are not your friend. They have a common goal or a common foe. Imperialism is taking, usually taking natural resources by one stronger military country than the other. And nationalism is supreme, intense feeling of pride for your ethnic group, your country, your people. So, of course, World War I, we have the first industrialized weapons, modern poison gas, airplanes, submarines, grenades, all of those. Alliances, there was an armed camp basically ready to fight, and that was Europe. They had their sides. They knew who was going to fight with whom. Imperialism, two examples, the Berlin Conference, which leads to the scramble for Africa, and the British winning the Opium War against the Chinese, which opens up spheres of influence in China by the Europeans. And India and Britain's crown jewel. Britain uses India for cotton and other natural resources and really controls them like a company would. And then examples of nationalism, the unification of Germany, Bismarck, that blood and iron, the Balkan Peninsula, the Bosnians wanting to be free from Austria-Hungary. Of course, in India you have the Sepoy Mutiny as an example of nationalism, and the Boxer Rebellion as an example of nationalism in China. World War I, millions are dead. There's a flu epidemic afterwards, and there's intense rebuilding that needs to be done. There's an end of empires. There's no longer a Russian Empire, an Ottoman Empire, Austrian-Hungarian Empire. There's no longer a king of Germany, a Kaiser. The Treaty of Versailles is very harsh. It blames Germany. Germany has to pay reparations. They lose land. They lose their military. Of course, then an economic Great Depression happens, and we see the rise of fascism because of it. In the Arab-Israeli conflict, we can go way back to the Roman Empire and how the Romans kicked out the Jews out of the Holy Land, the diaspora, the history of anti-Semitism throughout Europe, the Palestinians being controlled by other people, the Ottoman Empire, the British Empire, that during this time of main causes, you get the beginning of Zionism. This is a belief in Jewish nationalism that Jews should be able to have a homeland and that homeland should be in the Holy Land. And then during World War I, you have the Balfour Declaration, where the British government supports the creation of a Jewish state in Palestine and how they control Palestine after World War I. That's called the Mandate System. And then, of course, the horrible Holocaust, which leads to a partition plan of Palestine in 1947. But Palestine does not agree. Then when Israel is created, we have the 1948 war in Israel, which Israel wins and takes more land. 1956 Six-Day War, which Israel wins and takes more land. 1973 Yom Kippur War, which Israel wins. So we have some issues there. We also have like the Camp David Accords and the Oslo Peace Accords, where countries try to help Palestine and Israelis come to some agreements. There's a lot of terrorism involved, groups like Hamas and Hezbollah. There is issues of natural resources in the Middle East, of course, nationalism, and of course, religious issues. If you get an essay in revolutions, we talked a little bit about this in class, you describe the historical circumstances, the causes, and you discuss the political, economic, or social effects. Here are your choices: Neolithic, French, Haitian, industrial, Russian, Mexican, Chinese, and green. All right, here are my two picks, industrial and Russian. If I'm going to talk about industrial revolution, I'm going to say, Britain was the first. They had the money, the materials, the stable government, the workforce, the inventions, the people, the navy. They also had an agricultural revolution, so they had enough food to feed their people, more than enough. They also had something called an enclosure movement, where wealthy landlords would fence off their land and use technology. They didn't need as many tenant farmers. So those tenant farmers who did not own anything moved to the cities in great numbers looking for work, and that's the process of urbanization. Impact: some people become very rich. Middle class does grow, but most people are very poor. There are many inventions which lead to a variety of goods, cheaper goods sometimes. The working class works long hours, 12 to 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, little pay, child labor, very dangerous conditions, and they work in factories, mines, railroads. The early part of the Industrial Revolution, we see the concept of capitalism with laissez-faire capitalism from Adam Smith in his book, The Wealth of Nations. And then by the end of the Industrial Revolution, we see in 1848 Karl Marx and Frederick Engels write the Communist Manifesto, where they gave the workers a status and they gave them a new name called the proletariat. And they said, look at workers, the only thing you have to do is lose your chains, unite, overthrow the bourgeoisie, that middle class, and form this new perfect utopia. Well, the first perfect utopia that we see try to be invented, created, is in the Russian Revolution, which is our other topic. Of course, before World War I, Russia was ruled by a Tsar Nicholas II, who basically claimed divine right. There was great disparity in Russia. There was everybody who was, most everybody who was poor and a peasant, a farmer, and then a very small noble class that owned all the land and the wealth. There was a lack of rights for the Russian people. There were shortages of food. And like I said, most of the people were poor peasants. The small factories that they did have, those people were not making a lot of money either. An example of unrest before World War I, before the Russian Revolution, is Bloody Sunday, when people protested for better working conditions, better pay, and the Tsar ordered the troops to open fire on the protesters. By 1915, Russia has been in the war a year, and they had close to 2 million dead soldiers by that time. They had shortages of food, they had a lack of industrialized weapons, and the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, promised peace, bread, and land. Peace will get you out of World War I. Bread, because you're starving. Land, it'll be wonderful. We'll all share the land. This will be this communist Karl Marx utopia. So the Tsar abdicates. Lenin signs the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with Germany and gets Russia out of World War I. He then renames the communist government, then renames the Soviet Union, or Russia, the Soviet Union, or the United Socialist Soviet Republic. And then, of course, Lenin fights a civil war. Then when he comes to power fully, he institutes his programs, and he has a secret police called the Cheka. And before his death, he does introduce something called the New Economic Policy, which gives a little capitalism to the Russian revolutionaries and says, look, you can have some private ownership, we can have some money flowing. It's a compromise, and it's a way to kind of kickstart the economy. And it's also foreshadowing to what Gorbachev will do with perestroika. We have a global issues essay, which was your review number 8, which some of you had problems with. It says, describe how the issue affected a specific country or region, explain a solution to the proposed problem, and discuss the extent to which the solution has been successful. Your choices: deforestation, nuclear proliferation, AIDS, famine, terrorism, refugees, pollution, desertification, child soldiers. Here are my picks. Nuclear proliferation and terrorism. Nuclear proliferation. The United States drops the 2 atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan, in August of 1945. This breeds this idea of a Cold War between the United States and the the Soviet Union, because there's a fear of mutually assured destruction. Today, the U.S., Russia, China, North Korea, France, United Kingdom, Pakistan, India, Israel, and Iran would like, but all those other countries before Iran have nuclear capabilities. One of the solutions is the United Nations Atomic Energy Commission, and basically they do on-site inspections to safeguard against violent use of atomic energy. We also have things like the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty in 1996. No more countries were able to gain nuclear capabilities, and ongoing talks with Iran right now, with our Secretary of State John Kerry and others trying to figure out if Iran can have nuclear energy capabilities. The other issue is terrorism. It's worldwide. You can see it in the Middle East, Europe, the United States, of course, 9/11. One of the solutions has been the war on terrorism, which has included the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, new airport security and just general security, the rise of ISIS, the Islamic State in Syria, and ISIL, the Islamic State in Iraq. We have ongoing issues, basically, with terrorism, NATO, and it's a military alliance trying to help safeguard us, and the United Nations trying to solve international problems as much as possible. This just shows you who has nuclear weapons in the world, all the countries. And then individuals always come up in some way. This one just says individuals that had change. It says describe the historical circumstances that led to this individual developing this idea, explain an action, discuss how this individual's idea affected society. So you got 3 bullets here. Examples: Pericles, that great Greek guy; Martin Luther, Queen Elizabeth, Toussaint Louverture, Karl Marx, Gandhi, Kenyatta, Mao, Mikhail Gorbachev, Mother Teresa. Here are my picks. Luther and Gandhi. Luther, early Renaissance, part of that questioning inquiry time period, the why. Johann Gutenberg's technology, his invention of the printing press, printing the Bible, the most printed book in the vernacular, people's everyday language, the RCC rules over people during this time. Luther, a monk in the Catholic Church, posts the 95 Theses, reasons why indulgences are not in God's plan. The peasants do revolt in the Holy Roman Empire. Luther is excommunicated by the Catholic Church. The German princes side with Luther. They want freedom from the Roman Catholic Church, of course. The impact is that there's no more unity of faith in Europe. Henry VIII makes the Church of England, Anglican Church, and religious wars. For Gandhi, British colonialism, of course, the sun never sets on the British Empire. India is its crown jewel. Cotton, 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 cotton. There is definitely mistreatment and lack of rights for Indians in the British Empire. An example of this is the Sepoy Mutiny, way before Gandhi's time, but important. The Armistar Massacre, which is during Gandhi's time, where the Indians are told not to assemble in a group, not to have public meetings, and the meeting is fired upon by the British troops. Gandhi helps lead the Indian National Congress, the INC. He creates a program called the Homespun Movement, where they make their own cloth instead of buying British-made cloth. Boycotts, which includes the homespun movement, speeches, civil disobedience, that should be disobedience, jail, hunger strikes, and of course that salt march, 240-mile march to the sea to ceremoniously make salt. The effect: independence from Britain, but no unity. There's a split. Pakistan's Muslim, India's mostly Hindu, refugees from both places, fighting, disputed territories like Kashmir, nuclear weapons, and rivalry today. Let's see you get an economics essay. We haven't had one since 2009, but this one, sometimes economics is embedded. This one says, choose between the Middle Ages, Industrial Revolution, Age of Globalization. Pick 2 out of the 3. Describe the economic or social changes that occurred and discuss the impact. Okay, so Middle Ages, Industrial Rev. Middle Ages, after the fall of Rome, manor life, manorialism, everyone's job is tied to the land. Feudalism is the big system that manorialism is in. The social order, no social mobility, you are born into your class. Middle Ages is a time of great fear where the RCC rules. They support education for some, like the monks. Latin is the language spoken of the educated. Crusades, of course, leads to change and trade, and history's most successful failure, and is the ladder to the Renaissance. Whereas in the Industrial Revolution, you have this cottage industry where people would make things in their home, to going to factories and inventions being used in those factories. Mass production, variety of goods, urbanization, wealth for the few, and most workers have a very difficult life. Explaining that Britain is the first to industrialize. Capitalism is promoted by Adam Smith and his Wealth of Nations. By the end of the Industrial Revolution, communism is a theory. Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto, and of course that will lead to the Russian Revolution in about less than 100 years. And then, of course, Industrial Revolution leads to European imperialism, scramble for Africa, spheres of influence in China. This is one about political systems. It asked you only to pick one example, explain the change the government took, why the government wanted that change, one specific policy, and discuss the extent to which the change was achieved. It has lots of different ideas to choose from. I picked 2 just because usually you have to pick 2. This one just has 1. I outlined the Meiji government and Stalin's government, the change, the why, the policy, and the extent. Okay, and here's some more pairs here if you want to look over them. Look over individual leaders and geography and its influence. So please just use these to prepare.